Hi everyone, and welcome to TS Fibro. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified of any new videos I put up, and hit that thumbs up for me. Today's video is going to be on 2019, what they've done up till 2020 or before that to get us a new test, new medication, hopefully a cure. But let's go back and see. It's been more than a decade since the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved Savella. That was the last pharmaceutical earmark for fibromyalgia. Over the years, multiple drug companies have announced plans to develop new fibromyalgia treatments, but none has made it to the market yet. The waiting game continues. During 2019, we wait. At least 4 new drugs are under development, but it's anyone's guess if or when any of those treatments will ultimately end up in our hands, in the patient's hands. Based on current timelines, it would be surprising if the FDA approves any new fibromyalgia drugs again this year, but there's a small chance the TNX-102, a sublingual version of Flexeril, may make it to the market if the drug performs well in its latest Phase 3 study. Last spring, Ohio State University announced researchers have developed a new blood test that can diagnose fibromyalgia and differentiate it from similar conditions. Lead researcher Kevin Haxall hopes the test will be available to patients within 5 years. There are at least 2 fibromyalgia blood tests currently on the market: the FMA test from Epigenics and an RNH-based test through Equity. Although neither test is widely used by physicians or recognized as a valid diagnostic tool by the American College of Rheumatology, the ACR. Without a reliable blood test, doctors are supposed to use the ACR guidelines to diagnose fibromyalgia. However, a national databank of rheumatic disease study published last February found not all physicians are following those diagnostic criteria. Of the 497 patients, only 24% met the ACR guidelines for a true fibromyalgia diagnosis. Physicians failed to diagnose fibromyalgia in almost half of the patients who met the criteria. Around 11% of the patients were labeled with fibromyalgia by their physicians, even though they did not meet the diagnostic criteria for that diagnosis. This study supports a previous Canadian study, which suggested up to 2/3 of patients diagnosed with fibromyalgia may have actually been misdiagnosed. The opioid war continues. Last year, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, finally admitted its opioid prescribing guideline is negatively impacting chronic pain patients. Since the guideline was released in 2016, thousands of patients have been forcibly tapered off prescription opioids and left with few options for managing their pain. The guideline was intended to be voluntary and was only supposed to apply to primary care physicians, but federal agencies, states, insurers, and many doctors adopted it as policy, much to the detriment of those who depend on opioids for pain management. In an article from Pain News Network, Dr. Deborah Dowell, Chief Medical Officer for the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control and co-author of the guideline. She said, "Some policies and practices citing the guideline went beyond its recommendations. The guideline does not support abrupt tapering or sudden discontinuation of opioids, but has been inappropriately cited to justify hard limits or cutting off opioids. In addition, we've heard reports of misapplications beyond the guidelines' clearly stated scope. For example, applying the recommendations to patients in cancer treatment, or experiencing surgical pain. The American Medical Association has criticized the misapplication and inappropriate use of the guideline, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, warned that forced tapering puts chronic pain patients at greater risk of withdrawal, uncontrolled pain, and suicide. As a result of these concerns and others, the CDC announced late last year it will be updating the guideline by late 2021. It's anyone's guess if the update will benefit chronic pain patients or dole out more of the same. In a related matter, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration announced last month that illicit fentanyl, not prescription opioids, was the primary driver of the U.S. overdose crisis in 2019. Despite that, the DEA continues to cut the annual supply of prescription opioids, which is already at its lowest level since 2006. Are Lyrica and Neurontin becoming the new enemies? During 2017 and 18, a growing number of reports came out of the UK warning doctors and patients about the addictive qualities of Neurontin and Lyrica, two drugs commonly prescribed for fibromyalgia-related nerve pain. In 2019, we saw the first stirrings in the U.S. of what might eventually be a crackdown on Neurontin and Lyrica, similar to what we've seen with opioids. In December, the FDA announced it would add new warnings to Lyrica, Neurontin, and their generics, cautioning doctors against combining these drugs with others that can slow breathing, including opioids. The FDA announcement went on to say, "We have also required the drug manufacturer to conduct clinical trials to further evaluate their abuse potential, particularly in combination with opioids, because misuse and abuse of these products together is increasing, and co-use may increase the risk of respiratory depression." Earlier in the year, University of Oxford researchers released the results of a new study which linked these drugs to an increase in suicide behavior, unintentional overdoses, injuries, and car accidents. A clinical toxicology journal article published in December further established a connection between Neurontin usage and an increased risk of suicide attempts. A 2018 Canadian study found that people who combined opioids and high dose of Lyrica over 300 milligrams were twice as likely to die from accidental overdoses than those who just took opioids. Last July, the FDA approved the first generics of Lyrica, which will save you lots of money. Early cannabis research looks promising. An Israeli study found more than 80% of fibromyalgia patients experienced an improvement in their symptoms after using cannabis for 6 months. Researchers also reported 22% of patients in the study were able to stop or reduce their use of opioids. What about fibromyalgia in the gut? Last June, researchers from McGill University Health Center in Canada found that gut microbiome of fibromyalgia patients is noticeably different from those of healthy controls. They found that fibromyalgia and the symptoms of fibromyalgia, pain, fatigue, cognitive difficulties, contribute more than any of the other factors to the variations they see in the microbiomes of those with the disease. They also saw that the severity of patients' symptoms was directly correlated with an increased presence or a more pronounced absence of certain bacteria, something which has never been reported before. Researchers aren't sure if the variations in bacteria are actually causing fibromyalgia or simply a manifestation of the condition. More research is needed to answer these questions. We all wish for that magic pill, so it's a big deal when pharmaceutical companies announce they're testing out potential drugs for fibromyalgia. After all, we are way overdue for new pharmacological fibromyalgia treatments. It's been more than a decade since the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, approved its last drug for the treatment of fibromyalgia, Savella. That statistic right there is proof of just how perplexing fibromyalgia is for both patients and the pharmaceutical industry. But 4 companies are up to the challenge of figuring out the mystery of fibromyalgia and are in the midst of trying to develop new fibromyalgia drug options for patients. If successful, several new drugs may hit the market in the coming years. Hoping for 2020. There are 4 new fibromyalgia medications under development in 2019, and they're carrying over to 2020. Aptney Incorporated announced positive results from a 23-patient Phase 2 study of its novel NMDA receptor modulator NYX-2925. During the single-blind, placebo-controlled, sequential design study, advanced imaging techniques found statistically significant improvements in brain activity biomarkers for central pain processing. Patients' reported pain and other symptom scores were also promising. According to a press release, there were no serious adverse events reported during the study, and the drug was well tolerated by patients. The statistically significant effects on both pain-related brain activity and patient-reported clinical measures eloquently demonstrate that NYX-2925 is acting in the brain to alter pain processing, leading to pain alleviation. The results of this study reinforce what was observed in patients with advanced painful diabetic peripheral neuropathy, or DPN, in our recent Phase 2 DPN study, in which NYX-2925 greatly alleviated the centralized pain that is predominant in these patients. The consistency of these data confirms the confidence in advancing NYX-2925 as a treatment for chronic pain. In 2019, in the latter part of the year, they were going in to recruit fibromyalgia patients for a larger 12-week randomized placebo-controlled study of the NYX-2925. So hopefully they're making great progress with that one. The statistically significant effects on both pain-related brain activity and patient-reported clinical measures eloquently demonstrate that NYX-2925 is acting in the brain to alter pain processing, leading to pain alleviation. The results of this study reinforce what was observed in patients with advanced painful diabetic peripheral neuropathy, or DPN, in our recent Phase 2 DPN study, in which NYX-2925 greatly alleviated the centralized pain that is predominant in these patients. The consistency of these data confirms the confidence in advancing NYX-2925 as a treatment for chronic pain. In 2019, in the latter part of the year, they were going in to recruit fibromyalgia patients for a larger 12-week randomized placebo-controlled study of the NYX-2925. So hopefully they're making great progress with that one. The next drug is IMC-1. The FDA fast-tracked IMC-1, a combination of famciclovir, a common antiviral, and celecoxib, an anti-inflammatory arthritis drug, in early 2016 for a Phase 3 trial, but progress has moved at a slug's pace since then. For the past 2.5 years, IMC-1 has undergone animal studies as required by the FDA to determine potential toxicity. IMC-1's parent company, Innovative Med Concepts, was seeking $30 million from investors to fund the Phase 3 human study. If successful, the trial should finally start early this year, according to Dr. William Pridgen, the drug combo's discoverer. As a gastrointestinal surgeon, Pridgen is an unlikely source for the next blockbuster fibromyalgia drug. However, his drug combo of an antiviral and anti-inflammatory addresses a theory that many in the fibromyalgia community have suspected for a long time. Fibromyalgia could be caused by some sort of underlying infection. In Pridgen's case, he believes fibromyalgia is triggered by the herpes simplex virus, HSV. IMC-1 works by combining famciclovir and celecoxib, both of which have antiviral properties to suppress HSV. Pridgen says he successfully used the drug combo in his Tuscaloosa, Alabama medical practice for years. He said he's treated thousands of patients with this protocol, and every single day he gets to witness exactly what this medication does. Once you suppress the virus, it takes about 12 to 14 weeks for the immune system to reset and for the body to feel normal. We're seeing about 90% of patients will get 85% better if they follow the protocol precisely. This year's trial is anticipated to involve 250 to 500 patients at up to 50 sites around the country. The next one is TNX-102SL. In 1975, one of the pioneers of fibromyalgia research, Dr. Harvey Manofsky, was able to induce fibromyalgia-like symptoms in healthy college students by depriving them of deep sleep for several nights. He concluded fibromyalgia should be considered a non-restorative sleep syndrome. That research was some of the early inspiration for TNX-102SL. A low dose of sublingual version of cyclobenzaprine, developed by Toxic Pharmaceuticals Holding Corp. Cyclobenzaprine, sold under the brand name Flexeril, is a commonly used muscle relaxer and sometimes prescribed off-label as a treatment for fibromyalgia. We think the best way to understand how our drug TNX-102SL is working is by improving sleep quality, says Dr. Seth Ledbetter, CEO of Toxic. Sleep quantity is something that is delivered by Ambien or Lunesta, or some of the benzos like Klonopin, but the difference in those drugs tend to be injurious of high-quality sleep. What's distinctive with our drug and our treatment protocol is we think this medicine improves sleep quality and doesn't get in the way of some important activities that your brain does at night when you're sleeping. The next one is TNX-102SL. In 1975, one of the pioneers of fibromyalgia research, Dr. Harvey Manofsky, was able to induce fibromyalgia-like symptoms in healthy college students by depriving them of deep sleep for several nights. He concluded fibromyalgia should be considered a non-restorative sleep syndrome. That research was some of the early inspiration for TNX-102SL. A low dose of sublingual version of cyclobenzaprine, developed by Tonix Pharmaceuticals Holding Corp. Cyclobenzaprine, sold under the brand name Flexeril, is a commonly used muscle relaxer and sometimes prescribed off-label as a treatment for fibromyalgia. We think the best way to understand how our drug is working is by improving sleep quality, says Dr. Seth Ledbetter, CEO of Tonics. Sleep quantity is something that is delivered by Ambien or Lunesta or some of the benzos like Klonopin, but the difference in those drugs tend to be injurious of high-quality sleep. What's distinctive with our drug and our treatment protocol is we think this medicine improves sleep quality and doesn't get in the way of some important activities that your brain does at night when you're sleeping. Tonics has run into some issues with bringing TNX-102SL to market for fibromyalgia. TNX-102SL did not meet its pain-relieving goal in 2 previous trials when administered to fibromyalgia patients at a dose of 2.8 milligrams. It seemed like TNX-102SL was destined for failure like so many other potential fibromyalgia drugs before it. But Tonics became hopeful again after a trial of patients with post-traumatic stress disorder reported good results when taking TNX-102SL at 5.6 milligrams. Last April, Tonics was able to get FDA approval to move ahead with a new Phase 3 study this fall in which TNX-102SL will again be administered to fibromyalgia patients, but this time at a dose of 5.6 milligrams. We did 2 studies with a dose of 2.8 milligrams, and in both of those studies we saw very encouraging evidence across the board, Letterman said. We saw it in the daily pain score, we saw it in the Fibromyalgia Impact Questionnaire, we saw it in the other measures of fibromyalgia, and in both cases we narrowly missed the primary endpoint. We think with twice the dose, we've got a good shot of getting a better result. This fall's trial is expected to enroll around 500 patients at 25 sites around the United States. The last one is ASP0819. There is very little that's known about Astellas Pharma's fibromyalgia drug ASP0819 other than the company completed a Phase 2 placebo-controlled study last year involving 186 patients. No results or other details have been posted yet. When asked for more information, Astellas spokesperson Stephanie Perdos provided the following statement. ASP0819 is in Phase 2 development as an investigational therapy for the treatment of fibromyalgia. We are currently analyzing existing data to determine next steps for the program. ASP0819 is now on clinicaltrials.gov, and I think they closed the trials May 20th or March 20th. But if you want to go to clinicaltrials.gov, it's on there. Well, that's 4 drugs that at least they're trying to come up with to battle fibromyalgia. And if you're like me, you don't care what it's called, where it comes from, as long as it's safe and it works. Because all of us would love to go back to our old lives, a normal life, be able to go back to work, to go out with your kids, to go out with your husband, to just go for a walk without hurting. It's exciting that we have potential treatments. So I hope everybody enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe to my channel and hit that thumbs up for me. And I hope all of you have an awesome day. I pray for a cure, and I pray you have a pain-free day. God bless everyone.